Tonight, Question Time has come to Paisley, outside Glasgow. A town with a history as richly woven as the shawls that made it famous in the 18th and 19th centuries, and a proud tradition of radical politics. It's also Scotland's Town of the Year 2025. Our audience members arriving here this evening reflect the general political picture across Scotland. Welcome to Question Time from Paisley. On the panel, the leader of the SNP at Westminster, Stephen Flynn. He's also standing in the Scottish parliamentary elections in May and is being tipped as the party's future leader in Scotland. And Sarwar is the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. He's hoping to become First Minister next year, but at the moment his party is battling Reform UK for second place in the polls. Findlay leads the Conservatives in Scotland. He says he wants to cut taxes, promote growth and challenge what he calls the long-standing socialist consensus at Holyrood. Malcolm Offord defected from the Conservatives to Reform at the weekend. Lord Offord, who's a former trade minister and a Tory donor, says his old party has given up on Scotland. And Angela Haggerty is a journalist and commentator who supports the idea of Scottish independence but has been critical of the SNP's record in government. Good evening. Welcome to our panel. Good to see you all. Welcome to our audience here in Paisley. And, of course, welcome to you at home. Just sit back and watch the programme, join in the conversation on social media, whatever you like. But we're going to get started with our first question, which is from Christine Hutchison.
How can the government assure taxpayers that the lifting of the two-child cap benefit will actually take children out of poverty and not just fund their parents' lifestyles?
So the UK government announced that the two-child benefit cap is going to be lifted from April next year. What's your feeling about this, Christine?
Well, I don't have children of my own, unfortunately, but having seen some news articles where parents are complaining about being unable to feed their children, etc. They've maybe got 4 children. You see them getting interviewed and they've got their nails all beautifully manicured. And you think that comes at a cost. I think it all comes down to affordability. And with the money going to the parents, it's up to the parents how they decide on how they spend that money. And if they don't spend that money wisely, I don't see how those poor children are going to get taken out of poverty.
So would you have kept that benefit cap if the choice had been yours?
I possibly would have done, but looked at other ways in which we could take children out of poverty, because that's most important.
Stephen?
Look, child poverty in Scotland is falling at a faster rate than anywhere else on these isles because we introduced the likes of the Scottish child payment, and it's why we were arguing that the two-child cap should be scrapped so that we can reduce that rate even further. Now, belatedly, the UK government came to agree with us, and that's happening, and children will be lifted out of poverty as a result, and I think that's a good thing, and we all have a moral responsibility as taxpayers and as citizens in Scotland to want that to be the case. I guess the bigger question, though, that you've asked there is affordability, and when we look at the UK economy and the finances which underpin it, they're not in a great state, and the Chancellor's budget just, 2 weeks ago now, had growth being downgraded, had living standards rising at a slower rate than they otherwise would have done, and of course we'll see people with wages that are comparable to what they were in 2008.
But I think Christine's question was more about how can you guarantee that the parents will spend that money on the children? Is that right, Christine?
Yeah. The children are getting lifted out of poverty. Where are you getting that information? You're still seeing children going to school, not having proper clothing, not having had a warm food, to go to school with. They're not getting fed properly. So where are you getting this information that they're actually getting lifted out of poverty?
Yeah, of course. So in relation to the point, if I could just finish my point, one of the reasons why people are in poverty is because wages are at the levels of 2008, and I think that's deeply regrettable, and it's a reflection of the union itself. When it comes to kids being lifted out of poverty, we take into account what all of the experts tell us in this regard, and I like to think that their assessments will be accurate. And when it comes to the Scottish child payment, we've seen that reflected in the numbers of kids that have been lifted out of poverty, and we have to have faith in those parents that they'll spend that money wisely to look after kids as best that they can.
I can't always blame the wages for it. You only have to look at the latest iPhones, the cost of them. They seem to be able to afford things like iPhones, nails, tattoos, etc.
Anas.
I'd make a few points, Christine. First is, it's not the children's fault, and these children don't deserve to grow up in poverty, and therefore it's right government takes action. And 500,000 children being lifted out of poverty because of the decisions made in that budget should be welcomed rather than criticised by the SNP leader and Stephen Flynn. Second point I'd make is, where I do agree, is welfare can only be one part of a joined-up approach to challenging poverty. I fundamentally believe that welfare is the sticky plaster, but actual fact, if you're going to challenge structural poverty, it means giving kids the education they deserve, giving them the skills they deserve, the jobs they deserve, and the level of pay they deserve, so they can lift their families out of generational poverty that has scarred too many parts of Paisley and too many parts of my home city of Glasgow for far too long. And the reason why this urgent action had to be taken is because we're trying to repair 15 years of damage done by the Conservatives, where they deliberately pushed people into poverty and punished them because of their ideological drive, and that was unforgivable. So I agree with the lifting of the two-child benefit cap, but what we need now is the urgent structural action, and so much of that is actually in the poverty in Scotland. So let me give you an example. I used to be the local dentist here in Paisley, and I saw directly that the health inequalities that people faced were directly linked to their economic inequalities. And unless we lifted those people out of poverty, we couldn't get them to have better health outcomes. And unless we gave them access to health care, we couldn't also lift them out of the structural economic poverty.
Why is lifting the two-child benefit cap for Labour a moral mission this year? And last year, it just wasn't.
So, first of all, you can only make decisions when you know where the money is coming from.
Well, there's not suddenly more money this year. That's why taxes are going up.
And that's why it was important that we identified that money. But the reason why it's a moral mission is I don't think it would be acceptable, after the 15 years of damage we've had for the Conservatives, that a Labour government, people that came into politics because they want to fight poverty and eradicate poverty, we would see child poverty numbers going up. And that's why we needed the urgent action. And I will wholeheartedly support that urgent action to lift 500,000 kids out of poverty. And it's not just that action. There's the living wage going up, £900.
OK, well, let's just stick the child benefit cap for now.
Down, but we have to challenge the structural issues that underlie it too.
Woman here in the front.
So now that the child benefit cap has been lifted...
Oh, it's going to happen next year.
It will be come March of next year. The SNP had a plan in place in Scotland that they were going to put a payment in place to help remove that for families of Scotland. Obviously, there was a fund that was going to be set aside for that. What do you propose that fund should now be used for in Scotland, now that money is now going to be sitting?
I'm going to come back to that, but I will make sure you get an answer to that.
Thank you.
The man right at the back in the corner.
Poverty's always been around and it always will be. But instead of the politicians all having a go at each other, why can't you all work together and try and solve this problem for the children and people that's struggling?
All right. What a common refrain that we hear on Question Time. Why can't you all work together? We hear that almost every week. So, yes, man here in the middle in the glasses.
Yeah, the lady asked quite a direct question. And to my mind, in many cases, the obstacle that stops these children being lifted out of poverty are in many cases the parents that are on receipt. And this is the problem. We can't guarantee that these kids are going to be helped because many parents use it for themselves.
Okay. In the pink T-shirt, I think it is, yes.
I think you need to trust parents. They're adults who want the best for their children. And I totally agree with lifting the two-child benefit cap. And I'd like to thank the Labour Party for lifting it, even though Stephen's obviously said belatedly that Rome wasn't built in a day, Stephen. Please, if other parties are doing policies that you agree with, why not just say you're pleased with the fact they're bringing out that policy?
I'm pleased.
You're pleased, aye. Yeah, but we dig in at the very beginning. Trust the parents. The parents want the best for their children. The two-child benefit cap's lifted, and I hope that the people benefit with their children.
Russell, obviously the Conservatives wanted to keep the two-child benefit cap.
Yeah, absolutely. Benefits have to be fair to the recipients of benefits, but also to the taxpayers that fund this country's very generous social security system. And if you look at the numbers, they're quite terrifying. In Scotland, under the SNP, partly due to the light touch benefit system they're bringing in, the benefits bill is going to soon reach, by the end of this decade, £10 billion a year, all of which will be paid for through your taxes. The gap right now between benefit spending in Scotland and the money they have to spend on benefits, that gap right now is £2 billion. And what all the parties here, including Reform UK, who claim to be socially conservative and fiscally conservative, they also want to increase the benefits bill. And that's why we think the benefits, the two-child cap is fair and is reasonable, because ultimately the only way you get kids out of poverty, you get families out of poverty, is by creating the conditions to incentivise work, to improve education, and to get people into well-paid jobs. That's the only way to do so. You don't trap people generation after generation in benefits.
Malcolm.
Well, there is now a conversation, a real live conversation going on about the balance between work and welfare. Yeah? And it's a conversation that we haven't had for a while, certainly not in Scotland, where we've had basically a centre-left agenda. What we've got an issue is human beings are intelligent and rational, and they'll do what is put rationally in front of them. If you get a situation where you can earn as much or more by not working versus working, you've got a problem. Now, if you raise the child to 3, for example, 3, you've got a mother and a father not working, and they're claiming their various benefits on sickness, etc. Compare that with a family where mother and father are both working with 3 children. The working family needs to earn £71,000 to be the equivalent of what you would be getting if you were collecting all your benefits. So therefore, there's something gone wrong with the system there. There's something gone wrong with the incentive, the balance of risk and reward, of work and welfare. The only way out of poverty, we all want everyone to be out of poverty. We're all agreed on that. The difference in the right and the left is this idea that the state will give you welfare. Our view will be let's get people into work. The best route out of poverty is a good job. Now, just on the issue of the reform position, working families where parents work, we should encourage them to have more children, shouldn't we? Our population is declining. We should be encouraging, I think, more our good working families to have more children. That's something we should look at quite separately from the benefits bill. But we need to look at the balance right between benefits, between welfare and work. And the best route out of poverty is work.
Well, there's lots of mutterings going on around the panel, Malcolm, because as I understand it, the reform position of which you are now a member is to scrap the two-child benefit.
The issue is to make a differential for working families. If you're in work, if you're in that family who are earning £71,000 and you're having to work, then I think we should be in a position to bolster families, working families.
I think it's really important to stress, look, as a Labour Party, I believe the best route out of poverty is work. But we shouldn't pretend that the beneficiaries of lifting the two-child benefit cap are all children that live in families that don't work. The majority of kids in this country that are in poverty are in working households.
Okay.
And so that's why we've got to address low pay and chronic low pay in our country.
Well, look, since we were talking about reform policy, obviously we're delighted that you're here, Malcolm. I don't know if you two have spoken since Malcolm left the party. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you know, but Malcolm was treasurer of the Scottish Conservatives until Saturday when he defected to Reform. I don't know if you want to have a chat. I mean, I don't know if you have actually spoken.
We did have a chat. Yep. I was more pleased to see Mr. Flynn than I was to see Lord Offord. But, you know, I mean, it's a bit like football. I'm a huge fan of loyalty, both in life and in politics. And it's always hugely disappointing when someone defects from your party. It happens across all parties, and it's not something that most loyal party members have any time for. It reminds me a wee bit of the World Cup next summer. You know, when I'm cheering on Scotland against Brazil, and if we go a goal down, not that I expect that to happen, but if we do go a goal down, I will keep supporting Scotland, unlike Malcolm, who I think would run off to the sports shop and buy a Brazil top. I'll fight for what we stand for. I know what we stand for. We represent the views of many, many people across Scotland who work for a living, who want to see their public services improved, they want to see the education system improved. They look at Holyrood, as I do, in despair at the way in which they waste so much time and money on absolute nonsense. And that's why I will keep doing what I'm doing, because I believe in conservatism in Scotland, and I'll keep speaking up for the vast majority of people out there who know the values of what we stand for.
OK. Well, Malcolm, you clearly don't agree with that, because you said you don't think the Conservatives, despite having been Conservative for I don't know how many years, don't have a vision for Scotland. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, the first thing to say is I was at the Scotland-Brazil match in 1990. I was at the Scotland-Brazil match in 1998. I'm planning to go to Miami, and I never sold a jersey once, so I don't think we need to take that analogy. And when it comes to football, we all know that when you play the man, not the ball, it's because you're losing the argument. The reason why I moved position from Conservative to Reform is I don't believe the Conservatives have got any ambition for Scotland. I don't believe Russell personally feels he wants to be the First Minister. I don't believe that the Scottish Conservatives think they can produce a narrative for Scotland.
And it wasn't anything to do with the fact that Conservatives are doing so badly in the polls compared to Reform?
This is completely a personal decision of mine that over the last year, I find myself increasingly at odds with the Conservative position, and I made my frustrations very clear along the way, and ultimately you have to follow your convictions.
You sent me a message 5 weeks ago saying that you were going to... I've got it here. Where is it? You sent me a message 5 weeks ago. Let's hold the line. What happened?
Well, the issue, Russell, as you know, is that when you are in conversations,
you can look at each other.
When you're in,
can we get some popcorn?
When you're in a conversation, when you're applying for a new job or you're losing one team to join another team, you don't discuss it with the previous team. You secure your job. That's the modern world. You secure your job first.
Okay. The best thing about that answer is at least he can afford World Cup tickets. He's the only person here that probably can.
OK. Angela, would you like to answer the original question? Christine's question, let me just remind you, because we slightly got off it. How can the government assure taxpayers that lifting the two-child benefit cap will take children out of poverty and not just fund their parents' lifestyles?
You can't guarantee that. You can't. But that doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing to do it. Because I'm sure there are always going to be people across any section of society, and I'm thinking about tax avoiders and tax evaders as much as someone who's on benefits might be getting their nails done. There are some people who are irresponsible with money, and there's nothing really that you can do about that. The vast majority of people are not falling into these brackets. And I have to say, see, when I listen to politicians talking about the benefit system, it's very clear that they don't use it and that they haven't had very much direct experience with it. The misinformation about how the benefit system actually works is shocking to me. And bear with me, right, because I'm going to get into a wee bit of detail here, but I think it's worth doing because I'm getting really tired of seeing politicians on TV making claims about how benefits work when it's not how it works. The idea that someone who's on benefits can be doing vastly better than a working family who are earning quite a lot of money, that can't be true when you have a benefit cap. There is a cap on benefits. There is a cap on the amount of money that anyone can get in the universal credit system on a monthly basis. There is a thing called the local housing allowance, which means there is a cap on how much a person can get help with their rent. That's a problem for people because rents have gone up dramatically, particularly private rents. The universal credit, the DWP, will quite often not cover the rent payments, which means you have to find the rest of the rent payment out of the remainder of the money that you have. If you have children, that means that you're using the money that you have for the children on the rent. And because you have a two-child cap, you're not even getting that extra element for if you have a third child to help. So the idea that living on benefits is easy, that it's simple and that you have a lot of money, I think is wild. You know, I've seen politicians going on TV, I'm sure even possibly from government, I think, making this claim that we have a sick note culture, a fit note culture in the UK, that people just go to their doctor and they get signed off sick and that's it. They're just lying around on benefits, having a great time. That's not true. You can get a sick note from your doctor. It will only last you a few months, and then the DWP put people through assessments and they decide if they believe that you're fit for work or not, and they can and often do overrule GPs. Okay, it's not easy to access this system if you're someone who is disabled and you're someone with children. This is a very, very challenging system to be living in right now. And this mythical benefit system that I keep hearing about, where everyone's having a great time and they've got lots of money. I just don't see, when you actually go and ask people what their experience of this system is, I can't find where this system is. And also just another point is that something like 30 or 40% of universal credit claimants are in work. You know, as a large percentage of people are from working families as well. We have a system here where wages, you know, the idea when I was growing up was you grow up, you get a good job, and you can pay for a mortgage, you can pay for your kids, you can pay for holidays, you can have a nice lifestyle. Wages no longer cover that. For women, even if we can go out there and get jobs, we've then got the astronomical cost of childcare to contend with.
Okay.
You know, so what we have here is a system that is not working for people, and it's not about people who are spending 10 or 15 or 20 quid getting their nails done. It's not about them.
Just briefly.
Just very quickly, there is a cap on the universal credit, but if you can access, because of your personal circumstances, the PIP payment and the UC Health, you get a situation if you're a single person, you can get clear £2,500 more.
I know that,
than
Malcolm.
If you're on minimum wage. My question to you is that the right balance? Should you be able to make more money by not working than working?
If you have a disability,
yes,
you don't really have a choice in the matter, and that's what those things are there for. And by the way, they are also notoriously hard to access. PIP has a very specific points-based criteria that you have to be able to meet in order to get it. And you only need to look at the facts and figures to see how many people get rejected by the DWP, how many people have to go to appeals, have to go to tribunals. These are not easy systems to access. You are misrepresenting.
Sickness increased so dramatically in the last 2 years?
Because perhaps people are. I mean,
what's happened to the population in the last 2 years?
There was a massive global pandemic in 2020. There was that affected people in a number of ways.
Let's just park this for a minute, because otherwise we're not going to get around any other questions. And I just want to make sure that Stephen answers the question that was asked by you, I believe, which is with the, so. For those who aren't aware, when the government at Westminster decided that it would maintain the two-child benefit cap, the SNP said that by March 20 next year, you would introduce something, it was the SCP, which would basically be a replacement for that. You're not going to do that now because the two-child benefit cap has been lifted, so what are you going to spend that money on?
Well, what we're doing already at the moment is we've got the baby box, we've got the early years grant,
we've
we've
got
two and a half days of childcare.
So this is different money. What are you going to spend it on?
The Scottish child payment, and the First Minister in the budget in just a few weeks' time will reallocate that £155 million to build upon those things that exist only in Scotland, they don't exist anywhere else on these isles, and make sure that more kids are coming out of poverty, because that's our record and we're very proud of it.
Very briefly.
Because now that the two-child benefit cap is going to get lifted, it's about £120 million that's going to be freed up. I think if we're going to make a meaningful difference to people's lives in Scotland, it has to be targeted support to low-income families to challenge that structural poverty I talked about. For example, our college budgets have been decimated. We know that the best route for work, for working class kids in particular, is through colleges, but we've neglected our colleges. Apprenticeships have been cut. Let's target the money so we can challenge the structural poverty issues, give kids skills and give them jobs.
And I'm going to stop you.
Two-word answer, cut taxes. Use the money to cut taxes for hard-working people.
Right. It's going to be quite hard work, this programme, really, to get a word in edgeways for you guys, but we're going to try. We're going to try, aren't we? OK. Oh, listen, before we get to the next question, I want to say this is our last show of 2025. We're back on the 22nd of January in Macclesfield. So if you live in or around Macclesfield and you would like to come and be part of the audience, apply to the Question Time website and hopefully we will see you there on the 22nd of January. OK, James Sinclair, where are you sitting? Ah, there you go.
Reportedly, 1 in 3 kids in schools in Glasgow don't speak English as a first language. Why does this matter?
So this has come up, James, and I'm sure this is why you're referring to it, because Nigel Farage, your new leader, Malcolm, talked about the fact that 29% of primary school pupils in Glasgow have English as a second language, and he described it as the cultural smashing of Glasgow. Is he right, Malcolm?
Well, I wouldn't use that language. But what we're dealing with here
is... So what's wrong with that language? What's wrong with that language?
I know. The immigration issue we're dealing with is something which is a worldwide issue, a European issue. And it's coming at us fast, and faster than we've ever seen before. If you think about the whole of the 20th century, 1 million people came to the UK. So far in the first 25 years of this century, 7 million people have come to the UK. That's a lot of people, right? Now, we have a tradition in our country of being welcoming to people from other shores and welcome them in so long as they come in to work and contribute, learn our language, adopt our culture, adopt our values. We've got a strong tradition of that. This statistic is highlighting just the fact that this is happening faster and bigger than we've seen before. We've got a lot of people coming in from places that we don't know so well, where cultures are not so aligned. We need to integrate. We need to integrate to make our communities cohesive. And the question is, how do we do that when we've got this speed of immigration coming in, and it's costing a lot of money? If you think about Glasgow, has got a 100 million black hole next year in its budget, and Glasgow councillors are saying that 2/3 of that, 66 million, is dealing with the immigration and asylum issue. That's a lot of money, and there's a lot of money being had to be paid for the people who are here already, who are welcoming and want those people to come fine, but they need to know, they want to know who they are, and they want to know that they can assimilate into our culture. And the number one thing surely is we have to speak the same language.
Why are you presuming they're new migrants? Why are you presuming they don't speak English? And why are you using Glasgow children to spread your bile and poison into our communities? It's utterly shameful. And you might not agree with the language. You might not agree with the language, Lord Offord, but you need to own it, because that's what you are part of now. You are part of a political party that deliberately spends tens of thousands of pounds questioning my loyalty to Scotland and lots of other people's loyalty to Scotland. And all you really are is a poisonous, odious man hiding behind the badge of reform, looking to divide our communities rather than change our communities. And let's not forget, Lord Offord, that when I was here serving the community of Paisley as a local NHS dentist, you were an advisor to Ian Duncan Smith. You were the man that served in Boris Johnson's government and Liz Truss's government. So don't you dare try to be the great champion of working class communities in Scotland. People have seen your light before and rejected them, and I've got no doubt they'll reject them again.
Can I come back? So recent polling suggests that the top 3 issues of concern to Scots are the NHS, the economy and immigration. The politicians speaking on this topic are reflecting what the concerns that people have. That's why we're talking about it, because this is a concern that's come up quite recently, only in the last 5 years or so, and it's illustrated by the scale, the numbers. That's what's being illustrated here. As I said before, we've got a tradition of being welcoming. Of course we do. But we need to know who people are. We want them to assimilate to our culture and speak our language.
Let's fix the broken immigration system rather than picking on Glasgow kids. Yep. Let's fix the broken immigration system.
Woman here in the orange sweater.
Hi, I work in social housing, have done so for the last 20 years. And there is an issue with people that are coming to Scotland. Communities are divided, and this has all been following on from decisions made by all the political parties over that time. So as an issue, a lot of the people that are kind of coming, they're getting all sorts of help, and this is creating resentment from established people because they see the country that they were born and bred in, they're not getting the same help. And yeah, Scotland is a friendly country, but you start creating division where you have people getting and not getting. And I have to take issue with that.
Let's hear from the audience. Man in the white shirt at the back. Yes, you, sir.
Yeah, I think the division is also related to labelling people. My wife runs an ESOL class, English for people for whom it's not their first language. And this is adults, and there are folk from Spain, from Ukraine, from Poland, from Syria, from everywhere coming to willing to learn English. And I have to say that one of those folks is a lawyer, somebody was a primary school teacher back home, and somebody was a children's doctor. And the reality is that those 3 people couldn't access a job here in Scotland. They've got other work, but it wasn't in the field that they come in. So there's an issue about how to integrate and help these folk to actually come because they want to work. And one chap, as I said, the guy that's a lawyer is actually working in the hospital laundry.
Right, OK. Yes, they were wearing a pink shirt back there. Yes, yes, you.
I think the statement is bang out of order because you don't need English to be your first language to be able to communicate. I personally, English is not my first language, so if I'm feeling something, you ask me, is English your first language? I'll say no. However, I can perfectly communicate in English despite it being my third language. So I think the problem with that statement was saying it's not their first language, and who cares if it's your second or third and you can communicate with the problem. For me, it's an issue. If you can't communicate, that's fair enough. But being a third, fourth, fifth language, no problem. If you can speak it, then well and good.
Okay. And listen, I should just clarify, because I said 1 in 3 primary school children. Actually, it's school children, generally. It's not just primary school children. Russell?
Yeah, well, I agree with the lady at the back. Speaking English as a second language is nothing whatsoever wrong with that. I also agree with the lady in the pink shirt who talked about a lot of communities are feeling divided. A lot of communities see services, public services at breaking point. Glasgow, in particular, due to decisions taken by the SNP government, has resulted in significantly more numbers of immigrants coming to the city at great cost. The city right now has debts of £1.6 billion, and it's going back to the earlier point about taxation. It's about how we spend our money and how we can afford it. But I think in respect of this particular issue, the much greater issue, aside from immigration, is about education. The education system in Scotland, under the past 18 years of the SNP, has been completely and utterly trashed. You've got something like 1 in 4 primary school children going into secondary school not at the required levels of literacy. In other words, they can't read or write properly. It's absolutely appalling, a national scandal. And the number for numeracy is something like 1 in 5, 20% of kids are going through primary school into secondary school, not equipped, not at the stage they should be at. And that is where we should be putting the focus.
Angela, 1 in 3 school children in Glasgow don't speak English as a first language. Why does this matter?
I have a little boy. He's 5 in Glasgow, and so he's just started school. And he had a speech delay because he's a COVID baby. And this is really common among the COVID babies. A lot of them had speech delays or other developmental delays that you wouldn't normally expect, but they're catching up with them really quickly now that life returned to normal. But that speech delay worried me because I know that there are some schools in some areas of Glasgow where you do have such a mixed population in them that English may or may not really be a dominant language when he's going into primary 1. And I was thinking, well, is that going to affect the way that he's learning then if he already had an issue? You know, it was a very, very practical thing that just occurred to me, like, do I need to think about that? And then I very quickly realised, no, I don't really need to think about that. Kids' brains are like sponges. He would be fine. We have Gaelic schools in Glasgow, for crying out loud. In some cases, we're encouraging our children to speak languages other than English as the first language at school. So I kind of got over that. But I understand where the lady talked about communities that are concerned about the way that their communities are changing and the way that services are being used and who has access to those services. I think these are normal concerns to have when the makeup of your communities are changing, when you have immigrants coming into those communities, whether that be immigrants who are coming in because they're seeking a different, better way of life, or it could be asylum seekers coming in because they're fleeing something absolutely horrible and we are giving them a safe haven. And I think one of the issues we've had is that the people who are in favour of immigration, who are in favour of providing a haven for asylum seekers, have not wanted to have the conversation very much. And this is what plays into reform, where they say, oh, you can't say anything, you call us racist just for bringing up concerns. Well, there's been a bit of an issue in that I think that the people on the pro-immigration side have had a tendency to do that, instead of realising that actually you need to be able to go into communities and talk to people about this stuff, have serious, real conversations, get people together. That's how you get integration. You get people talking together. You ensure that people don't fall into separation of groups, which is, I think, what's happened in some communities. Now, the issue that I have with Farage is that when he's talking about these things, which I think, let's say that some of these issues are real and that they're real concerns of communities, the angle that he's coming at it from is that immigration in any form is inherently a bad thing for society. But that's the sense that I get from the things that he said. I mean, what was the language that he used there? I think that's some cultural smashing. I think that's some pretty strong language. You know, I think we all have a sense of what Nigel Farage thinks and feels about these issues. Now, I think people need to start getting a bit more brave about standing up and saying, no, actually, immigration is just a thing that happens in countries. It's a normal thing. It can be a very positive thing, and I'm in favour of it. I support it. I understand why it's a benefit to my community. I understand immigrants are coming over here and they're working a whole range of jobs that are helping keep my community ticking over. It is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, and there's no reason why a kind of cultural mixing and integration has to be a bad thing. We need to get a bit more proud of immigration and stop feeling like we're on this defensive all the time, where actually it's better to just not talk about it. Stephen.
Yeah, look, a bit like Angela, I've got one young kid who's in primary school, albeit in Aberdeen, not in Glasgow, and I've got a younger kid who's in nursery just now, and many of their friends are bilingual and multilingual despite being really young. And, you know, the notion that a man who aspires to be the Prime Minister of these Isles would pick a fight with school kids, would seek to ostracise school kids, would hold school kids up as an object to beat, absolutely repulses me. And I think it should repulse all of you as well. And I hate to say it, I really do, but this confidence that he has to say some of these things stems from the fact that our current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, called us all an island of strangers. Not Enoch Powell's words, well, they were, but they were also repeated by Keir Starmer. And this is a culture that we now have coming out of Westminster, and it does us all a massive disservice. Because you know those wee kids, when they grow up, they'll grow up to be our doctors. They'll grow up to be our lawyers, our nurses, our bus drivers, our videographers, our hosts. They'll be our friends, our family, our neighbours. And we should defend them as if they are our own, because those wee kids, they are our own, because they've made Scotland their home. And I'm proud of that fact.
Very briefly,
I want to come on the leading the Orange Tops point, because I think it's really important. My issue with what Nigel Farage did was that he was deliberately trying to find a divisiveness rather than offering a solution. I don't think anyone that has concerns about immigration or a lack of housing supply or a lack of skilled jobs or a lack of opportunities for too many of our young people is racist or stupid or doesn't understand politics. I think they're legitimate concerns. The problem I have is Reform want to look at a problem and find a reason to divide us. I look at a problem and think, what do we do to fix it?
Okay, hang on. I need to let Malcolm respond to these things.
And the problem you've got with Stephen's response, you can try and shout at me all he likes. He can try and be the plastic hard man all he likes, right? But the reality is that the approach of saying, let's not talk about immigration, and if you talk about it, it only helps reform, actually you inadvertently push people towards reform. We have a broken immigration system under the last government, and we have to fix it. And unless we fix it, we're going to continue to see more and more challenge and more of our communities divided. And as someone that was born and brought up in Glasgow, I do not want to see that. A city that's always welcomed migrants and always will welcome migrants.
Malcolm, a lot has been said about your new leader as of the last 3 or 4 days. Do you want to respond?
Yeah. I just want to pick up what the lady in the second row said in the orange jumper.
Well, do you want to defend your new leader against these accusations of divisiveness?
I do, because what she has said to us all this evening is that whether we like this or not, we have an issue with this. We have an issue in this area that we need to fix in order to have cohesive communities, not to divide. If we don't deal with it, we will end up with cohesive and segregated communities. We need to discuss this. We've always had immigration. We always will have it. It needs to be controlled. It needs to be transparent. And we need to be able to deal with it economically as well. I'm also very concerned about our own people in our own communities, perhaps in the less well-off areas, who are also feeling segregated. We have to help them get back to work, have better lives. We've talked about the welfare trap that some of those folks are in. We have to help them into work. And we can't just have a whole bunch of people coming in to do jobs when we actually want to get our own people back to work. So I think this is we want a balanced debate on this, but this is an issue, it's a real issue, we need to deal with it needs to be controlled, and it's out of control, it needs to become controlled.
And just very briefly, do you agree with the phrase cultural smashing of Glasgow?
I personally wouldn't use those words, but I'm local.
Three disagreements with Nigel in one show
Let's
already.
Let's take another question from Julia Mullen. Where are you, Julia? Off you go.
Trump is right that Europe is decaying and its leaders weak.
So pretty strong words, I think it's fair to say, from Donald Trump and from the National Security Strategy, which was, well, I think it was leaked actually, but we all got to see this week. So Donald Trump said about European leaders, I think they're weak, but and I also think they want to be so politically correct, I think they don't know what to do. It's pretty unflattering about Keir Starmer, isn't it?
Look, I don't agree with the comments. We have a challenge, particularly with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where we have a threat really nearby. Let's be really clear, Russia would love to see the destruction of Ukraine and to spread that destruction across Europe and views us as their enemy also.
So why do you think Donald Trump said this, Anas? Europe is decaying. He talked about civilizational erasure, Europe decaying with these weak leaders.
Well, I think you need to ask Donald Trump why he has those views. I disagree with it. But in saying that, I do still believe that we need to maintain ties with a US administration, regardless of what the political colour of that US administration is, partly for defence reasons, partly for economic reasons, but also because whilst there might be political disalignment between the UK and the US, there is still business-to-business relationships, there is still people-to-people relationships, and ultimately we have got to do everything we can to stop the aggression coming from Vladimir Putin to protect our own nation. And that's why I do agree with the increase, for example, in defence spending here in the UK. That will disproportionately benefit us in Scotland in terms of economically, £10 billion of investment with the Norway deal on the Clyde, other commitments coming around thousands of jobs to the Clyde and to Rosyth. Good for Scotland, good for Scottish economy, good for business, but also good for national security.
Do you think Donald Trump has got any kind of put when he talks about European weak leaders, specifically in regards to Ukraine?
So I'll be very honest, I think the US administration is apparently going to be looking at all our social media before we go to America next year, so I'm wondering if they're going to be watching what we say on Question Time. But I'm not going to temper myself because I'm pretty outraged at the fact that when we're at war on our continent, and we are at war with Russia, our most trusted ally is choosing proactively to try and divide Europe. And I think that does the United States of America a massive disservice. And I think it also does all of us a disservice. And I think the challenge that we face right now is to make sure that we respond to that accordingly and that we unite across Europe against our common enemies and show President Trump that we are willing to bear the burden that we have to in terms of our own defence spending, but that we need our allies to work with us in that context. And there was a pretty big announcement in Europe very recently of a £150 billion defence fund that we could have accessed, but we chose not to. And we chose not to because we're not in the European Union anymore. So we need to be very careful that we don't get pulled in both directions, one way across the Atlantic, one way to Europe, and end up missing out on the security that our people here in Scotland, right across these isles, deserve.
Angela, what did you make of those comments?
Trump is a nationalist. What we've seen in Europe over the last number of decades, I guess, is a more open-minded approach. We've had freedom of movement. We've just had a much more kind of liberal culture, I guess. It's not something that Trump would like, but I think that what Trump is doing when he's making these grand statements and using this kind of inflammatory language is it's his way of trying to pull people into his agenda, into his worldview, and knowing that the US has so much power and we are still so reliant on the US that this will actually really scare European leaders. It does frighten them, the language that he's using, because you can see in their reactions that they are scared that the US could abandon them at any time of Donald Trump's choosing. And that is a very, very big deal, because Europe has not been investing in its own defence. Europe has not been making itself much more resilient in recent years. It hasn't been doing it. I find that astonishing, actually, sometimes, that we're nearly 4 years since the invasion of Ukraine, and Europe is still only talking about upping the investment. That's kind of the level of where we're at. Now, the other thing about Trump is that even as inflammatory as some of the things that he says are, there's often just enough truth in what he's saying, and that's why it catches on with the general public. And I think that when it comes to Europe, I think, I think back to the financial crash of 2008 and how European leaders responded to that, and bailouts and all kinds of chat like that. And there was a general sense among the public at the time that us, the little people, were going to have to do all the hard work to pay for this. That smaller countries like Greece, I think, maybe, and Ireland were getting a really, really hard deal, and that the way the EU handled it didn't feel tremendously popular. When you think also about EU culture, what does it mean to be European? How do we define ourselves as Europeans? Is that really a thing? You know, would Brexit have happened if we felt like we were close to Europe, that we had European shared solid values? Would these things have happened? So I don't think that Europe is the very united, values-driven continent that some of the leaders chat about. I don't know if that actually filters through to the people. And that's why what Donald Trump says tends to catch on just enough, because he speaks to something that's in our heads when we kind of think, well, what do we really think of European leaders? Do we look at our European leaders and think they're the really strong guys, or do we look at leaders like Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump and think, actually, we just really fear these guys?
The man there in the glasses, yes.
Yeah. My problem with Donald Trump is we give him too much respect. He doesn't give us any respect. As the most powerful man in the world, supposedly, his behaviour is appalling. So why do we give him? The time must come where we say, you know what, enough's enough. You go and do what you want to do, and we, Europe, we'll do what we want to do. To me, he's an absolute disgrace to be the President of the United States.
All right. And there in the red sweater, at the back.
Donald Trump is driven by money, nothing else. He is busy trying to cozy up to Putin because he reckons he'll get a good deal there. And meanwhile, he's been trying to sign a deal with Ukraine so that he can take all their assets out of them, all the rare metals and so on. He is totally driven by money, and it's appalling that a president should be doing this. He's got his own, crypto funds as well, and everything he thinks about is money, money, money. How much can he make? And apparently he has made an absolute fortune, him and his family.
Do you know who else is also interested in money, and only money, or was a guy called Nathan Gill, who was Reform UK's leader in Wales. And do you know where he is now? He's in the jail because he was taking bribes from Vladimir Putin. At a time when Europe is at war with Ukraine, the Reform Party leader in Wales was betraying each and every one of us. And now Malcolm has chosen to walk right into that party. Shame on him.
Malcolm, again, I've got to give you a chance to respond to that.
I never met the man in my life. Let's talk about Donald Trump. Whether we like it or not, he was elected by the American people as president. Point one. Point two, the US is funding the defence of Ukraine right now. From an American point of view, they look at us in despair and say, why can't we defend ourselves? When Russia walked into Ukraine in 2014, that was sovereign territory. Europe didn't lift a finger. Okay? And now 4 years later, as Angela said, the Europeans are speaking loudly and doing not very much from an American point of view. There was a general, wasn't Eisenhower, who said if you're doing foreign diplomacy, you speak with a soft voice but hold a very big stick. Okay? Europe's speaking with a very loud voice and has a very small stick.
But do you think his
comments are right? It turns out Trump's got a loud voice and a big stick.
His comments about civilizational erasure, Europe being decaying.
He can't understand, the Americans can't understand why Europe will not unite in order to defend Ukraine. That's the question. That's the exam question.
He was also talking about in the context of immigration.
Sure. And he thinks that there is an issue around integration, the same we've talked earlier about that. And he's wondering whether is that making us less resilient and less willing to fight? I don't know, you ask him. But the American point of view on this is that Europe doesn't seem to want to defend its own borders. And how long does America keep paying for that?
Russell.
Well, the world is incredibly dangerous and volatile, and we should all think very seriously about our safety in this country. We should take great pride in the fact the United Kingdom has stood resolutely behind Ukraine and offered them huge amounts of support financially and in military terms. And I'm deeply concerned about the future. If you look at the spending that takes place, we are at risk. And Donald Trump has said this long before he came back into the White House. Europe has not been paying its way. The United Kingdom haven't been paying as much on defence and have relied upon the United States for far too long.
So is he right then, do you think, to say that Europe is decaying?
I don't think Europe's decaying and the leaders are weak, but I do think where he is correct, demonstrably so, is year after year the NATO spending commitments have not been met by Europe. Many European countries have become reliant on the United States to defend them, and that is no longer going to happen. Now, our relationship with the United States, I believe, is enduring. It has served us well from the end of the Second World War until today. Presidents and prime ministers will come and go, but those bonds will remain. But I do think we need to think long and hard about getting serious about our defence spending. And I welcome the spending. I welcome the fact that Scotland is actually home to a number of world-leading defence businesses. And I'm delighted to hear Stephen actually welcoming defence spending when his party has been so opposed to defence spending. But we need to spend that money, and we need to do so not just for the military reasons of defending our own country against Russia, which is effectively at war with Europe, albeit not a hot war. And we also need to do so for the jobs that it creates in this nation. OK,
we've got about 7 minutes left. So forgive me those who still got your hands up. Lots of people asked about this next question, so I'm going to take it. Francis Donnelly.
Our Scotland fans been priced out of the World Cup by the greed of FIFA.
So, thought that might get a round of applause. So the ballot for tickets opened this afternoon. Now, obviously, you don't need me to tell you that Scotland beat Denmark to reach, with some astonishing goals, to reach the World Cup for the first time since 1998. Now, let's talk about the price of tickets. So BBC Sport understands that tickets for the supporters standard tier, I can't tell you exactly what that means, but it doesn't sound like massively VIP, in the final, for example, are just over £4,000, compared with £747 in 2022. The price of the cheapest ticket has increased almost sevenfold compared with the 2022 World Cup. Is there anything that can be done about this, Stephen, realistically?
I seriously hope so. I seriously hope that the football associations across Europe and the rest of the world will get together. So I'm a member of the Tartan Army. I go to a lot of the games. I've got enough points stacked up from going to games to buy a ticket. And it's a scam, because if Scotland get out of the group, which I think we might, then you have to reserve that ticket. No, you don't have to reserve it, you have to buy it in advance, and for the next round, and for the next round. And FIFA take your money, stick it in their bank account for months on end for a game you might never go to, and then give it back to you less an administration fee. I mean, that's the worst bank you've ever heard of, but it's a complete scam. Fans are being fleeced for basic tickets, they're being fleeced for future rounds, and it's incumbent upon our representatives in the FA in Scotland, in England, hopefully in Wales and in Ireland, if they can qualify as well, to get together with bodies right across the rest of the world and demand an end to this. It's not good enough.
You have to be reasonably brief because you haven't got long, Anas.
First of all, welcome that you think that Scotland will make it to the final. I love that optimism and confidence, Fiona, so thank you. I hope we meet England and beat them in the final. That would be fantastic.
I'll applaud you, Anas. Who says we don't unite?
Look, in short, yes, it is an utter scam. It's utterly shameful.
But can it be
stopped? It has to be stopped. because this is a deliberate fleecing, not just of Scotland fans, but actually fans from every nation that's represented in that World Cup. And football is about the fans. Football is about making memories and positive memories and happy memories. I think back to the World Cup in '98, and honestly, what Steve Clarke and the guys have done is incredible. It's lifted the mood of an otherwise pretty low-feeling nation, and everyone wants to cheer on the Scotland team, those that can make it on the front line in the US, those from here, they want to be in pubs that are still open, watching the game. So we all have to gang up. Genuinely, we all have to gang up with confederations and nations across the globe and say to FIFA, not a chance, and they have to go to do the right thing.
And that all sounds great, Russell, but do you think there's any chance that's actually going to make any difference?
The ticket prices are completely outrageous, no doubt about it. And we see this not just with
football. And then
football.
there's, of course, the resale ticket.
Yeah, and then we see it with concert tickets. You look at the price of a bang average concert nowadays, and it's 3 figures to get the most basic ticket, and it's completely outrageous. I think, you know, I know what it's like. I went to France '98 and I couldn't afford to buy a second-hand Brazil ticket, so watched it in a pub in Paris. But I did manage to get hold of Norway and Morocco tickets. I'd rather perhaps not have done so. And it's important that we cannot. Football is more than just a sport. Without fans at football, it's sterile, it's dead, it's not worth it. We need to get this fixed. But crucially, what the Scottish Government can do is get behind the campaign to ensure the pubs in this country are open in the wee small hours. So if you can't afford to go, you get to watch it in the pub.
Angela, very briefly.
I feel like I've learned a lot about which Scotland games Russell and Malcolm have been to historically tonight. But I mean, yeah, it's terrible. Ticket prices, awful. But I would actually agree with that. I think that in Scotland, this can still be a massive thing in the summer, even if the games are 1 in the middle of the night and 2 very late at night. We could think about what can we be doing here? How can we really take advantage of this here to benefit some of our businesses and small communities and try and make a bit of money domestically if we can't afford to be going over to the US?
So you're going by the sounds of things.
I'm going to go to the Miami for a Brazil game, yeah. Because, as I say, I've been to 2 already, and we keep on drawing Brazil in the World Cup. We keep on drawing Brazil, and apparently, if we want to win this thing, we have to beat them twice, right?
So what about the ticket prices?
And in the
I mean,
final.
You can afford to go. What about the rest of it?
The issue is that this is a commercial venture, and the reality is, sport in America is very expensive. Take the Super Bowl, $10,000, and they will charge, and there's people who want to pay it. And it's a commercial venture. You're not going to get FIFA to change their mind.
So do you think all this talk about getting everyone to all the football
I agree with Angela that
work?
actually the best parties will actually be at home, or some people will travel to the US and not go to the match and go and watch it in the US. But look, you're not going to get them to change their ticket pricing.
Okay, man there in the black sweater, yeah.
There's talk of them even doing a break after 22 minutes during the game to run adverts. What do you expect from FIFA? They're corrupt as anything, right? They made up a peace prize for Donald Trump. Right? They've got a history of it. I wouldn't put it by them that they're just going to palm us off and go, nah, on you go.
Very brief. We've only got a few seconds left. Woman at the back there.
I think that we need to be looking at our own football prices as well. I'm taking my kids to support St Mirren at the Cup final on the weekend, and I'm 50% more for my ticket from the semi-final to the final. And this might be a once-in-a-lifetime generational thing for my kids. St Mirren don't get to finals all the time, so we're going to support them. But we need to look at our own back garden and look at the prices that we're charging for domestic football, finals, semi-finals, because that prices a lot of people out. The final's 11 days before Christmas.
All right. I'm afraid we are out of time. I really want to spend more on this question because I knew you would be exercised about it, but I'm afraid I am out of time. So that is it from Question Time, this side of Christmas. We will be back in the new year. I just wanted to say, we haven't made a Christmas special, obviously. That's not what we do on Question Time. But we have made a short film about how we put the show together behind the scenes. It's called Imaginatively Question Time Behind the Scenes. And you can look at it on iPlayer, actually, if you want to find that. So Question Time Behind the Scenes, have a look at that. You can see how this all gets put together. But for now, from our panel and from our audience, thank you very much for watching. See you in the new year. Bye-bye.